I'm not going to worry about it.
This is my favorite opening. Where like, you ever watch these videos where like a dude is sitting there like at his computer, and you see him from the side, and he goes, "Oh, hi."
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So is that a camera there and that's a camera there?
Yeah, there's
right.
three. There's three cameras. You get your own.
Where are the
I know the lights are kind of bright.
Oh, I see it now. Okay.
All right. So moving right along, Neal Murthy, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And this
this is a show?
It is a show.
Oh.
It is a show. It's a podcast.
I just figured I was here at a bar. I stumbled into something.
This guy's had like 3 sips of a scotch or your bourbon, and
I'm kind of a lightweight.
He's already like, woo. So
do you know this thing about the Persians, the ancient Persians? Have you heard this?
Well, there's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things about. I mean, there's several things probably at least.
Yeah.
But they would debate matters, ideas, and such like this, both when they were drunk and when they were sober, and the idea had to make sense in both states of mind.
But how do they remember the part?
I don't know.
They must have had people.
I don't know. They're not lightweights.
They must have had people that could monitoring the monitors. Yeah. So it had to make sense. That's actually not because what was it? Who was it? I think Kid Rock said. Probably somebody else said, but Kid Rock said, "A drunk man's what is it? A drunk man's words are a sober man's thoughts."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what he said, but that makes sense to me.
It was when he caught a lot of shit about something that he had said in a drunken, like he was in a drunken tirade on stage, and like threw a lot.
Was it about Bud Light?
No, this was that he actually just took out a
shotgun,
like an AR-15 or something.
Oh, is that what it was?
What was it, Trev? What did he shoot the? Do you know?
It was one of the. It was one of the, one of the scary ones that they want to.
Yeah, that they want to take away.
They don't want you to have.
It was an AR, right? Was it an AR? He shot a case of Bud Light.
I want to create a podcast where, that Warren Zevon song, "Lawyers, Guns, and Money." I want to have a podcast.
I thought you were going to say "Werewolves in London."
That one too.
like that'd be a great podcast. Werewolves in London. So, speaking of Bud Light, we want to talk about not that. But you've been in the world of people starting businesses, now here's the thing is, my first question is, what's the right word? So is it entrepreneurism, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurialism? Like I hear all of these. Is there a preferred word?
My name's Neal Murthy, not Merriam-Webster. I really don't know.
But you're the entrepreneur guy.
I don't know. I call them entrepreneurs, and I usually use the word entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship?
Yeah, but I've heard entrepreneurialism. So. Yeah, but I don't know that it's a preference. It's just what I use.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just I thought maybe among the world of entrepreneurs, maybe there was like a preferred. What do you identify as? Is really what.
I mostly heard entrepreneurship.
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that turned out to be as interesting as it was in my head before I said it.
I'm sorry.
So we'll move on to the next thing. Well, wait. So you have you want to do a podcast on a Warren Zevon song?
Maybe. We're talking about guns. If we talk about lawyers and money,
what's the song again?
Lawyers, Guns, and Money.
Lawyers, Guns, and Money.
Yeah. Or Werewolves of London.
Yeah. So what lawyers? Actually, that sounds like Dan's podcast, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. So the one that Dan does here is Dan's Cadre of Experts, and Dan's a gun guy, so he has a tendency toward gun people on the show.
Oh, okay.
But
there are a lot of guns in Texas. So.
Yeah. So you're from here originally.
I am.
So we usually cover that.
Okay.
So you're from here.
Born in Dallas.
Born in Dallas.
Yeah.
Whole life in Texas?
Mm-mm.
No.
So born in Dallas, and kind of went through elementary school there, and then my parents moved to what might be considered anti-Dallas. I don't know. It's we moved to Connecticut. So I went to middle school and high school in Connecticut.
Some people would say that Houston is anti-Dallas.
That's somewhat true.
Yeah.
But
so Connecticut.
Yeah. So I moved to Connecticut with my folks, and was there and went through middle school and high school, and then part of college there.
Yeah.
And realized that.
Yeah. So what brought you back to the great Lone Star State?
Well, my brother, who's a lot older than I am,
Yeah.
He went to A&M.
He likes it when you say that, doesn't he? He's a lot older than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I emphasize it more year after year. So he went to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
When we were still in Dallas. And
he is a lot older than
he's
you.
he's 10 years older than me.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I guess that's a lot to me.
Yeah.
It was a lot. 10 years was a lot more.
Back
20
then.
years ago.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, so he went to Texas A&M and then found his way to Houston, and I was at the University of Connecticut, and I was. What I tell people is that when I was growing up, I had a perception. I'm Indian American, so I had a perception that I had 3 career paths that were available to me. One was I could be a doctor, I could be an engineer, or I could be a disgrace to the family. And I decided that I didn't want to be a doctor early on, and so I went to engineering school.
Right.
And after like a couple of years of it, I realized I didn't really want to be an engineer, but I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I didn't want to be a disgrace to the family. So my brother calls me up, and he says, I heard you're struggling with this a bit. And I said, yeah, I don't know what I want to do. And he says, well, if you want to come to Houston, not that this is the only option available to you, but if you want to come to Houston, you can live with me, and we'll enroll you at UH or Rice, and you can. I'll help you figure this out.
Yeah.
And he's like a second father to me too. I mean, because he's so much older than me. And,
right, yeah.
And our dad died not when we were especially young, but I was 27 when he died, and so my brother sort of took on the mantle.
Yeah, that's about the point in your life where you could use some like grown man
paternal
guidance.
Guidance.
Right?
Yeah, it's a different it's a transition in a different part of life, right?
It's not the parenting anymore.
So he became that. But anyway, that was much later. But when I was in college, he asked me if I want to come down here.
Yeah.
I came down here in '95, and I've been here ever since.
Yeah.
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 I've had other places, but had houses and things
Right,
like this.
sure.
But Houston's always been home since then. I consider myself a native Houstonian.
Yeah.
I don't know if a native Houstonian is considered a native Houstonian.
No, so we've actually we talk about that sometimes because when my family moved here way back in 1982, it was before I was born. No, I was in high school, and
you look great for your age.
yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It's the lights. But what you find out later is the camera adds 20 pounds.
Oh, okay.
I'm
trying to lose weight right now.
Are you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you're not doing it sitting here. So
Not with this burden, at least.
yeah, no, but there used to be this concept of they were very rigorous, like almost religious about this idea of a native Houstonian.
Yeah.
Like you had to be born here.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't be like, even if your parents were from here, but like your ass was born on some naval
Right.
base somewhere.
Right.
Like if you weren't,
Yeah.
if you didn't come out in Houston city limits,
Right.
you weren't a native
Yeah.
Houstonian, and that was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and you can be like from Cyprus or Katy or something like that. Right?
No.
You got to be from Houston.
You can't just be from the county, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think that's loosened up over the years because Houston. Also, when we moved here, there were bumper stickers that said, "Welcome to Texas. Now go home."
Yeah.
So it's different now. It's not quite like
It's
the way it was.
definitely a different attitude. But I'll tell you, I think that one of the things that I found when I first came to Houston that I absolutely loved was just how welcoming the city was, like all the people.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know if they considered me a Houstonian, but I still love. I mean, they welcomed me with open arms, and I've found that to be the case for going on 30 years now.
Like the whole Southern hospitality thing is kind of a thing. Like,
It is, and sometimes it's fake, right? Like kind of like a.
Oh, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally. I had to when I was doing business with people from New York.
Yeah.
And they were coming. This is some years ago, but not that long ago. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And they were coming down here, and we were meeting with a potential client. We were trying to sell something. I can't remember. And I think it was but it was a big company. Maybe it was Friedkin, but it was a big company. And these guys came in. And of course, I know something about the culture in the Northeast because I grew up in New Jersey. We came from New Jersey.
What exit?
It was further north. So I was up at around Morristown, around there.
Yeah.
So
My family's from. Well,
Yeah.
I have family, quite a bit of family around Edison.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, So I'm familiar with both cultures.
Yeah.
And these guys came down, and of course, you know, in New York, if you're doing business in New York City, if you're sitting in the meeting and they don't like what you're saying, or they just don't like the way you look, or whatever, they tell you forcefully in the moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like they say, like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like, right. But in Texas, these guys came down, and they were from New York, and we had this meeting, and there were some of the clients there, and then we were there, and afterward, my guys were like all fired up. They're like, man, that went great. And I knew why they were thinking that, and I said, why do you think that? And they said, wow, look, and I said, no, you have no idea if right now they're sitting in that room talking shit about you, because they're not going to do it when you're in the room,
right?
But you can't tell from that
right.
first. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not, I don't think it's like, it's not being disingenuous. It's just a different type of manners, I guess. Or
it
different,
is. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Actually, one thing, it's funny that you bring up New York about this, because in contrasting Houston, New York, I often tell people that about New York, they say that it's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
What I tell people about Houston is that it's a great place to live, but I wouldn't want to visit here.
That's so true. It is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I used to say something similar, which was it's good for boring adult life, right? Like, you know, but
there's a lot of things to do in this city, though.
Now,
yeah,
there's a lot more than there used to be. But
true.
You still don't have, you don't really have anything like you can't go to the mountains or.
Well, no, in terms of geography.
White water rafting.
Yeah, it's flat as a pancake, right?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot. Okay, so. So you lived with your brother.
You can go to the mountains. It's like 11 or 12 hours or something like this west of here, right?
It's only, and it's kind of like mountains.
Yeah.
But I'm a beach guy though, so
yeah.
even Galveston, it's not beautiful, but it's the beach.
Yeah, but you can get it down like Port A and things like that.
Yeah,
those are nice.
There's nice places. So
Galveston is nice a few days of the year.
Today would be perfect. In fact, the weather today. I wanted to have school outside today, but Trevor, I don't know. He said it would be too much trouble to haul all this shit outside, so we had to do it in here.
So when I asked my wife to marry me,
we're free associating.
we got engaged, and we were out in the hill country, and we're driving down this road, and she was talking to her family and things like that, and then she shut that off, and she looks at me and she says, "Okay, people are going to start asking us when if we're setting a date or whatever." And I said, "Okay, what are we going to tell them?" She said, "I want to get married late March on a beach in Galveston. I don't care what year." And we did. We got married on March 26th, and it was absolutely perfect weather.
And it was perfect.
Yeah, it was like 71 degrees.
A little windy, maybe. No,
on the beach it was.
Yeah,
but not like strong winds. It was just like a breeze. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was really, really nice.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
So yeah, there are a few days.
So I'm tracking back to your life story here.
Am I taking it two different directions?
No, we're good. But you're the one who's got a dinner at 6:00. So
do I?
You said that. So you came with your brother. So you came down.
I came here.
Hung out with your brother.
Yeah.
You went to school. And
he doesn't live here
figured
anymore.
things out. And so and then fast forward some number of years, and you and your wife got married on a beach in Galveston.
That's correct.
But in between there, like what happened? Like the short version. Just give me the short version.
Oh, I created and failed a lot of businesses. That's what I did. Yeah.
Fell fast. Are you the one who invented that slogan?
I don't know, but I'm certainly the poster child for it.
It's
a thing.
Yeah. So you created and failed. What made you want to? What made you want to? So the solution to the equation of don't want to be a doctor, don't want to be an engineer, don't want to disgrace.
I'm totally a disgrace to my family.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My family has no idea what I do. My cousin once came and visited me.
Yeah.
And he's a very, very successful neurologist, and he came to visit me, and we met up at a restaurant because he was coming in from the airport, and he was running late and all this. So we met up at this restaurant. He's seated, and I walk in, and I sit down, and it's him, and he looks at me and goes, "What do you do?" And I said, "I don't know."
Yeah. Usually that means you're so in my world, that meant either you were with the mob, right, or you were with the CIA.
That's fair.
It was one of those two. Yeah. So I had a cousin.
Both 3-letter words.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. And in New Jersey, my mother's side, so I have this nice Irish name, O'Sullivan, but my mother's side was Messina. And they were the Messinas in New Jersey, like you know, pretty much like you watch The Sopranos, take out all the killing parts as far as I know, and that was our family. And my cousin, I had a cousin Paulie, and Paulie,
there you go.
And all of a sudden, like Paulie, like one day Paulie he and his buddy had a local pool hall, and they're like 20 something, and next day he was moving into a house with the lions out on the driveway. And when you asked him, like, Paulie, so what do you do? He just said, I'm in banking. So
all right,
I don't know. So it's mysterious, but he wasn't with the CIA as far as we know.
Okay.
So that was also funnier in my head. It was funny at the time. He's like, yeah, all right, great, move on. So what do you do now? What do you do?
I don't know.
You don't know. Why did I want to have you on this show?
I don't know. I kind of like came in and used the restroom, and you're like, hey, the guy who was supposed to be my guest is, not here. So
he's not here. So if you could actually, there was a guy that came right ahead of you. We got his card. He was trying to sell copiers or some shit. And Trevor didn't know what you look like, and this guy did not look like you at all.
Okay.
Yeah. And he thought he was you. And so anyway, there was a lot of confusion in that moment.
Did you hear about that guy who, like, this was like 25, 30 years ago, and he went on like to ABC or something like this, and he was supposed to go in for a job interview, and in IT or something like this. So he went into the news network, and they thought that he was the guy they were supposed to interview live on the stage. So they mic'd him up and everything. They put him up there, and he just went with it.
Yeah,
he was supposed to talk about something about Microsoft or something like this, and he knew enough a little bit to kind of like wing his way through it, and he answered some questions and that sort of thing. And then they only later found out that he was there for a job interview.
That's funny.
I feel like that guy, right?
Yeah.
Even though I was actually supposed to be on the podcast.
I was trying not to laugh at that just for payback, but it was still pretty funny.
It wasn't my story.
So, all right. So let's talk about. What's your preferred word? Entrepreneurship. The reason why I thought, and I knew about you mostly because you were going to host that other podcast that hasn't come together yet. But
Oil and Gas Entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Go listen to it.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Is it?
You can cut that.
You haven't done it yet, though, right?
Well, we're launching probably in the next few weeks or so.
Oh, are we? Okay.
Yeah. I've actually finally recorded a few episodes.
Okay.
So.
Are they any good?
I don't think so, but I mean, that's not for me really to say.
It's all right. So,
Mark told me that that his first podcast episode was absolutely shit.
Yeah.
So I don't feel so bad.
His last one wasn't great. So he does watch this sometimes.
I mean, maybe what he's been doing it for 15 years or something now.
Something
So
like that.
I mean, eventually he'll get it.
So by the way, this show is loosely tied to the concept of the notion of the American dream. We talked about this before. You may not remember.
Yeah.
As old as you are now.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you put the book in front of me.
I did. We got the book. It's like a mnemonic device. So
we can promote the book, even though it's 80 years old.
It's
85,
almost
90 years.
90 years old. So what? All right. Let's talk about this. When I think about entrepreneurs and America and the history of America, I mean, it's clearly built on people who had ideas and pursued them. And this is supposed to be a place where you can pursue your ideas if you have them. So we'll get into that a little bit. But first, what's been in the news lately? What about this Silicon Valley Bank?
Oh man,
thing? Did that catch the startup world by surprise?
Usually.
Yeah.
It was a big thing. I mean, I think that
did it rattle people? I mean, I know what it says in the news, but like you're out there with the real people who were doing the real stuff.
It absolutely destroyed the psyches of many entrepreneurs for about 4 days. And I think that it still rattled people. I mean, it's going to have ripple effects.
Right.
But I mean, a very close friend of mine, her company, for example, Bank of Silicon Valley Bank, not a big company, had raised their first round of funding and things like this, and she has 1.2 million in the bank, something like this, and was all in Silicon Valley Bank. She didn't, and it all happened, 3 days before she was supposed to make payroll. She didn't have access to her money.
Right.
Or she thought she wouldn't, and I think she eventually got it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, things like that.
But you said it destroyed people's psyches for a few days. So that's almost like a bigger impact, right? Like, because the government can come in and mop up, and we can talk about whether they should do that or not. But the emotional impact, right? Because people who are in that sphere are already kind of out at the edge of their emotions a lot of times, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've worked with some of them.
If you're an entrepreneur and you're not a nervous wreck, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah. So you're already kind of emotionally stretched, and then this thing comes along. I mean, that was the behemoth, right, in that world.
Yeah.
So are people recovering?
From what I can tell, yeah.
I mean,
it's hard to tell, right? People. First off, a lot of these companies. I mean, if you were affected by this, you most likely had taken in some investment or something like this, right? So you have investors that you have to. I mean, they're the ones who are really concerned, right? I mean, the entrepreneurs, they're just kind of doing their thing,
right?
And you've got problems, and these entrepreneurs, especially the first time ones, they're not equipped to have investor relations or anything like this. They don't know anything about that. I mean, they don't have. I mean, they might have 20 people, but they don't have an investor relations person.
Right.
So they're pulling their hair out trying to figure things out over a weekend when they can't really do anything.
Yeah. It's got to. I mean, I did work in that world on a couple of different occasions for a little while, and on a normal day, it's tense, right?
Yeah.
So just on a normal day, worrying about making payroll. You worry about making payroll even when your bank hasn't failed.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So even though everything was kind of shored up by the government, and kind of pieced back together, it's I didn't realize this could happen to me.
So what's the view on that? Is it because there's been a lot of debate in the public square, i.e. Twitter, about should the federal government have come in and guaranteed the funds beyond the $100,000? Is it still $100,000? The FDIC?
Well, I think there's different tiers. But
okay. So
FDIC, FSLIC.
So should they have come in beyond that, or should we kind of follow the wisdom of Henry Hazlitt and say, like, you just let it work itself out? Because there's going to be pain in the interim, but every time the government comes in and tries to turn the dials, it just creates more long-term pain. So I guess when it's happening to you, you kind of like the idea that somebody's going to come in.
I think the problem is that the government has done it, and not just in this case. They've done it in the past.
Right.
So because they've done it in the past, everybody feels like they're going to do it again.
Yeah. And
so, should the government do it again and again and again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could reset back to a time, say, 80 years ago, before any of this was an issue, or maybe 300 years ago.
Before they started all the dial turning.
Before they started
right?
anything,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And we said, okay, well, what's the best approach to this? And we'll codify that in the Constitution or something like this, right?
Yeah.
I don't know which would be better.
Yeah.
But I do know that you have a system that's working now, and whether it's the most effective system or not, it's in place, and that's what people's expectations are, and they're set upon that.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to change things, and you've got to, there's going to be some hell to pay.
Yeah,
that's for sure. It's whenever it happens.
Yeah, you can't once you've been in the business for so long of the manual intervention. Right.
Yeah.
You can't just. It's very hard to unwind that.
Yeah.
In any kind of a. Yeah.
In this particular case, we're talking about billions of dollars, but what happens if there's a major economic turmoil that's in the realm of hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars? And if that happens, the government, even the U.S. federal government can't sustain something like that.
Right.
They can't shore something like that up.
Right.
So, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah.
I think that in this particular case, if you're an entrepreneur, especially in the context of like techie startups, I think that you're inherently you have to be taking risks, and you have to know that. So I mean, it's not. I think this was an instance where if they had turned down the dials and said, no, we're not going to do this, we're not going to support this. I mean, the assets still existed. Yeah. Even with Silicon Valley Bank, even with the whole thing, I mean, it was more a matter of liquidity than anything else.
Right.
So, but the assets still existed. But it's a question of, okay, well, are you going to be able to make payroll? Well, maybe you can't make payroll.
Yeah. Then what happens? Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I actually was with a company for a little while, and we were merging 2 or 3 small companies together, and they were big enough. They were small, but they were big enough to have people in operations and things and commitments and whatnot. And one of the companies had actually quit making payroll some months before the transaction, and the leader of that company, the CEO, had this amazing sort of charisma. He was somehow able to keep his people believing in even though like they had like mouths to feed at home and everything, and people are living on credit cards and of course we bailed him out, in the transaction, but it, I mean, everybody makes their own choices, right? Some people left and some people stayed, but the point is they didn't make payroll, and the world continued on.
Yeah, the currency of a startup isn't what's in the bank. The currency of a startup is its hope and vision.
Yeah.
And that's what you're banking on. I mean, everybody who starts out a new, and I'm saying startup in the sense that what we're looking at is something that's a scalable early stage enterprise. It's something that's in search of a business model, as Steve Blank put it. Right.
You're beyond the like 2 guys in a garage stage.
You are, but you're not necessarily like well beyond it.
Right.
And so you've got maybe some early employees, and presumably what you've done is you've given them some equity in the company.
Right.
Their principal compensation is that equity. I mean, it may not, maybe not in terms of in terms of monetary value, because the monetary value of that equity may be 0 or very close to 0. But ultimately what you're giving them is, hey, listen, if you come work with me, there's a good chance that you'll be able to pull together your nest egg within the next few years.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry ever again.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to work again.
How often does that happen?
Very rarely.
Yeah.
But that's the currency.
Yeah.
Here's some pieces of paper. It's definitely fiat money for sure.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, because I know people who are on their 3rd or 4th go at that. Not the founder, but the people who are signing up to that program that says, come do this with me.
Yeah.
And it only took me 2 times to realize that it probably wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But I know people who are on their 3rd and 4th and 5th try.
Yeah.
And I've also seen people in early stages of something, and they actually have, at some point they get an offer to get bought out.
Yeah.
Or to get taken over or whatever. And it's not the big money that they're hoping to make, that they're hoping to get, but it's good money. And they pass it up, right? They go, no, because we're hanging. Do you see this happen a lot?
Oh, it happens too.
And then there's some remorse later, where when things don't turn out 3 years later, things don't, and they go, oh, fuck, we should have taken that.
Yeah.
Does that? I mean, I've seen that. Is that
these things happen all the time?
Yeah. So you work with a lot. I mean, you used to teach.
I used to teach.
You were, so you don't at U of H.
I don't teach there anymore.
You're not teaching there anymore. And you're working in the community with.
Yeah, and I've been an investor and a consultant.
How do you steer? I mean, how do you guide people down the right path? Because these are things that, like, there's no.
Yeah, I try to tell them to run like hell.
Yeah, is that it? Is that pretty much the?
Most people should. Most people shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if I should be doing it, but most other people shouldn't be doing it.
Right. How do you know if you're one of the ones?
I don't know. I think that if somebody tells you to run like hell, and you're willing to stay the course, then maybe at least you got a chance.
Yeah.
I think what needs to happen, though, sincerely, I think that people need to be people who are advising them, mentoring them, etc. They need to be very honest with them.
Yeah.
You know, not just sort of buy into the hype. They need to say, look, this is hard, and the chances of failure are extraordinarily high.
Right.
But you know, if you're willing to give it a go, and it's a lot of work. Sometimes people ask me what it's like to be an entrepreneur, and I tell them, well, you work 100-hour weeks, but you get to choose which 100. Right? That's the way it is.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So I tell, you know, and I think people need to be honest with them.
So one thing that, well, and I mean, all right. So there's a couple things. I'm going to go down two different paths. So I'm going to park one. Some of that, the fact that you tell somebody this is really hard, and you should run like hell, and you're probably going to fail, and there are certain people who that makes them want to do it all the more.
Yeah,
that is kind of like the stuff of what this country was built on.
Precisely.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that?
If I may, there's this. I have this framework, I guess, that I tell anybody who'll listen, which most people don't, but about I call it the 3 A's of entrepreneurship, which is just funny. I know entrepreneurship doesn't have an A in it, so it's called the 3 A's of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship? I don't know what we should call it. Anyway, the 3 A's are, the first one is audacity, and I define audacity as the willingness to stay the course despite your failures. The second A is adaptability, and I define adaptability in this context as the willingness to change course despite your successes. And the third A is awareness, and the awareness is self-awareness and knowing when to be audacious and when to be adaptive. And there's no easy answer. There's no formula. There's no nothing. Yeah. I'm a mathematician and an economist by training, and I can tell you that at least I haven't found the formula.
There's no and yet we have and this country. So the United States doesn't have isn't the only place where ideas and determination and your 3 A's. By the way, I was thinking like you could put 3 A's in a circle and make like a bumper sticker, but then it might be confused with like the Motor Club, and then yeah,
I think I'd get sued.
Yeah, that was also funnier in my head. So this country isn't the only place where that has happened, obviously.
Yeah.
And there's at least one or two others, but it is kind of part of the fabric of it.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think it's the independence of sort of the American cultural fabric.
Right.
I always think that there's sort of a, historically throughout human history, there's been a sort of a dualism. It's a Manchiistic dualism of good and evil, right? But I actually think that the real dualism that exists in human civilization is one between individualism and collectivism. And I think that's always been the case, but I don't think that we recognize it. But we recognize it in American society because of the nature of individualism in the American society. And I'm not saying it's an extraordinarily positive thing. I mean, I think that it's a balance between things. Many other societies have an attitude that is far more collective. Like it's a society. Right, so we're all just kind of doing what we're doing.
I think we're trending in that direction. There seems to be
in American society.
Yeah,
I think there's more trend toward the middle. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
but we've always been on the individualism side of that divide.
Yeah, and depending on who you're listening to, if it's Ayn Rand, then we're nowhere near as far to the individual side as we ought to.
Agreed.
Right? But but if you're Keynesian, then you're the other way. Mm-hmm. But it is interesting that there's two there's two kind of things that I guess I see happening with respect to this. Long before we started calling it entrepreneurs and startups, and there's that basic people who had an idea, a vision, had the determination,
Yeah.
did the hard work, and did it not always. I mean, certainly for the greater good was maybe kind of in the mix somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what really drove people, right, to succeed, right? In it is they wanted to succeed because of that individual responsibility, determinate. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that like
Well, this country was founded. I mean, the American Revolution started taking place in 1776. It was the same year that Adam Smith published his A Wealth of Nations.
Wealth of Nations, right? Yeah.
Right? And so the foundation of this country coincided with the foundation of capitalism.
Yeah.
And sort of capitalistic thinking.
Right.
And then, I mean, in reality, the notion of capitalism, notion of private ownership of land and things like this preceded Adam Smith, but he collectivized, so that he collected that information and put it into a book.
Yeah, prior
right?
to that, it was the ownership of private property and land. The thing was sort of tied to families,
Right,
and
right.
or different hierarchies,
Yeah.
right, that had that. So
Right. Yeah. So no. Yeah. Agreed. And the notion of like inheritance and things like this through that.
Right.
But I don't think that it's a coincidence that the birth of the nation coincided with the birth of capitalism in a formal sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I know that the book was written that same year, but I never really thought about how that was the birth of capitalism.
Yeah.
Really.
The interesting thing though is that Smith doesn't talk about this notion of like the invisible hand and things like this. He doesn't talk about it in the context really. He's talking about the book is called A Wealth of Nations, right? And so it's not really a book about individualism at all.
Yeah.
And it's not the notion of sort of free market capitalism in the sense that we think of it and we interpret it today. Mm-hmm. But it is it did coincide, and sort of I think for interpretation, perhaps a misinterpretation of his words and other people's words, I think really led to the notion of what we think of as free market capitalism today.
Yeah. Well, and it's like kind of going back to your point. The Revolutionary War started in 1776, but the putting together of the government didn't happen until many years later.
Yeah, I mean the Constitution wasn't what was it?
1790,
1789, 1790, something like this. Yeah.
So, you had the war, and then you had all the and things. Information traveled slow, right? So it was probably 18 months before everybody even knew the war was over.
Sure.
And so.
Well, I mean, here in Houston or Galveston, we celebrate Juneteenth, right?
Right.
And the notion, because even up to the Civil War, information didn't travel. Even when the end of the Civil War occurred, which was 100 years later.
Yeah.
Even when the Civil War ended, people didn't know it had ended.
The email servers were down.
That's right. That's
right.
My Alexa device didn't work this weekend.
Not at all. Not at all.
So.
That's why you should always run your own email servers privately in your own office.
There's other reasons to do that too.
Yeah.
Especially if you're Hillary Clinton.
Especially if you're Hillary. All right. There's this thing. I want to come back to how do we enable people. I'm a little curious about, because it's true that our society, the fundamental, and we talk about this on the show in other contexts, but we talk about how the kind of what makes up the American psyche has been moving steadily, I would say, from the more individualistic point of view toward the collective view. Not by accident, I don't think.
No, I think that part of that is technology has also allowed, I mean, especially in the last 30 to 40 years, has allowed us to like form collectives more efficiently.
Right. And there's a different way of thinking, right? Like, do you see that? This is like a big question that maybe you might,
sure.
But do you see that impact, that change in the way society thinks? Is that have any impact on to what degree these entrepreneurs are able to be successful? Are they hampered or helped by that change, do you think?
I don't know. That is a big question. I hadn't really thought about it. I don't know that the changes in the way that entrepreneurs think is really grounded in any real way in the way that it certainly has like
right.
social and cultural norms and how those things change, especially over the long waves, certainly impact the way that people think, the way that they behave, the way that, what their values are, what their beliefs are, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know that any entrepreneur is sitting there thinking, I mean, I'd like to think myself as a reasonably educated and informed person, and I don't think that certainly think about like the long waves of social cultural norms.
Right.
And I think about these things, but I don't know that I think about them in the context of being.
But especially if you're younger.
But maybe being influenced,
you could be influenced
by them, sure.
by that way of thinking. So much the way like the whole ESG agenda has influenced company, right? What
Absolutely.
companies do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it certainly affects things, but in, for lack of a better term, micro ways, right? Like it impacts this, it impacts that, and so like 3 layers out, it's going to have an impact on me as an entrepreneur and how I do business, or maybe what my business even is.
Yeah.
Right? What my solutions are, what my technologies are, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. What made me think of it is because I know that when I look at today the whole comparing the younger generation to the older generation obviously comes up on the show a lot, and I see, like, I think back to when I was early in my career, let's say,
So 10, 15 years.
Yeah, 10
Okay.
15 years. Yeah. So I'm in my, let's say, late 20s, early 30s, right? And in the corporate world, right? I spent most of my career in like big corporate, big IT consulting, systems consulting, things like that.
Okay.
I cared about one thing, and I think I've said this before on the show, so people heard this, they can skip. I cared about one thing. I cared about impressing the people above me. And by impressing, I don't mean like brown nosing. I mean, I cared about doing my job and like leaving my mark on what was happening for the purpose of basically getting promoted, making more money.
Yeah.
And also just kind of leaving your mark on like, I did this.
Yeah.
Right. I certainly cared about my teammates, and I was collaborative and things like this. I mean, I wasn't an asshole.
Yeah.
But I didn't care about any of them nearly as much as I cared about, not about myself, but about like, that was why I'm here. Now, of course, I had mouths to feed at a young age, right? I was married, 22, babies on the way, right? All that.
Sure.
So I was motivated differently.
Yeah.
But what I do see, but most of the people that I worked with at the time, they all kind of had that same objective. The way they went about it was different. Like some people went about it like I did, like by working your ass off, probably sometimes more than I should have, right? And then other people tried to find shortcuts to doing that and just kind of kiss up to the right people. And I hated them at the time, but I kind of admire them now because they got it done a lot easier than I did, right?
Yeah.
So, but everybody had that objective. They just went about it in different ways.
Yeah.
Today, what I see in kind of the younger generations is they're not motivated that way. They're motivated differently. And I think that's a product of kind of how society has changed and shifted.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you could probably do a whole like sociological, anthropological study on that.
I don't know that they're motivated differently, though. I mean, I think, well, I mean, maybe it's a question of how we're using the word. I think everybody when they're young, old, whatever, as individuals, they have aspirations, aims, goals, whatever you want to call them, right? And the question isn't so much that the young people of today are different. I mean, their motivations, their aims, their goals, etc. They might be different than yours were, but I don't think that they're vastly different.
Okay.
I don't think that in the last 15 years that I don't think that things have changed so dramatically that it's going to cause those like broad socio-cultural changes. I think what has happened though is that people are able to realize who they are and manifest that because there have been other structural changes in our society. So you mentioned, for example, your companies that you were working for before, and you talked about what your motivations were and how they were kind of more resource driven.
Sure. Right. Yeah, it makes sense.
But it's also because the organizations that you were working for were themselves saw you as a resource, and they positioned you. You had a job. Yeah. And you were like, okay, well, I'm going to be hired for this job, and hopefully I can get promoted, or hopefully I can do well and be compensated and such like this. But the way that the company's leaders thought about this, up to and at least the 80s, and then continuing on until today, and probably for the next 20, 30 years, at least, they think about the people as a resource that they're collectivizing across the organization. I mean, the root word of organization is organize, and they're organizing these resources. So they're material resources, monetary resources, and manpower resources, right? You're one of the manpower resources.
Right.
So they're collectivizing those, and they do so in specific ways, right? Like the organizational hierarchy, and they have, you're like the 7th level down from the CEO or something like this, but you have a job. Yeah. And they've structured things so that you are motivated for that job. And you're motivated because you're like, well, I need a paycheck, or I want a bigger paycheck, and I'm going to do this thing. Yeah. And I'm going to please my boss, and I'm going to please my boss's boss, et cetera, et cetera. But these days, I think that, and I don't think that things have dramatically changed, but I think that they've changed just enough where companies, regardless of how small or how large, are starting to realize that a person isn't just a resource. A person is also filled with skills and abilities and ideas and all these things. And so they're struggling, organizational leaders are struggling to figure out how to use that. And the people who are part of the workforce are struggling to figure out, how can I fit into that? And some people have figured that out through technology and stuff like this in the gig economy, right? They figured out, I do a thing and I do that thing well, so I'm just going to do that thing as many times as I can for as many people as I can, and many as institutions, and organizations. And I don't need a
company over top of me.
I don't need to be working for one, man, right? Or whatever it is. And some people have found that, and some people have figured out that they want to do that even if they're not particularly good at it. I mean, I'm sure there are some Uber drivers out there with not very great scores, Yeah. But I think that, but I don't think that the underlying motivations have changed. I mean, yeah, sure. People are, for example, having, you had kids when you were 22 or something like this. Right. People are on average having kids these days. I've seen some statistics that like 27, 28, something like this. Yeah. It's a bit older, right? Yeah. And so, maybe a little bit more runway for them and figuring things out. But at the same time, people are still motivated.
What you're saying is Maslow kind of wins in the end.
Yeah, people still have a biological imperative to reproduce. Right. I don't happen to have kids, but most people in the world have kids. Yeah, yeah. And they're motivated to earn money to be able to provide for their family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but the
structures have changed.
The soup that they're swimming in is changing.
That's right.
Right. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
And everybody's trying to figure out their place. Yeah. And most likely it'll settle into a different equilibrium. Right. Right. And I don't know what that's going to look like.
So in the short run, or not the short run, in short, coming back to my original question / hypothesis, what I think I hear you saying is that the changes that we see in society and kind of like how American society is wired, individual versus collective, or any other sorts of shifts that we could see, you think is not having an impact. So that's not necessarily going to hamper our ability to produce these people who have ideas and do great things and are able to.
Let me say it in a different way, but I think, I mean, yes, but let me say it slightly differently, if you don't mind.
Oh, you're the guest. You can say whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. That's definitely a can of worms that you're opening up there. But let me give a little bit of structure to what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. So the way that I think about it is that there are 4 what I call M's of like human organization. Okay, starting with the most basic level. The atomos of human civilization is what I refer to as the me level. So it's the individual level. It's just you or me or him, right? Or whatever. And so that's the me level. And then when we collect collectivize me's together, we get to what I refer to as the micro level. So that's like a group or a company, or it could be as small as 2 people, or it could be as large as 2 million people. But they're all collectivized into like one sort of somewhat unified whole. Right.
Okay.
Then the next level is what I refer to as the meso level. Largely these terms come from like sociological literature. Yeah. But the next level is the meso level. I'm using them slightly differently, but the next level is the meso level, and the meso level is basically the collectives of the micros. Right. So you can think of this as like an industry or a market or something like this. And then the final level is the macro level, not surprisingly, and it's like a society-wide level. Right.
Right.
So. But here's the thing. So we're talking about individualism versus collectivism. Here's my take on it. I think that we are leaning more in the direction of collectivism at the level of the macro. But we are leaning more toward individualism at the level of the micro. So organizations are starting to recognize the value and the individual sort of components of individualism greater and greater and greater at the organizational level. But at the societal level, we're trending more and more toward collectivism. Yeah. As you pointed out.
Yeah, right? Interesting. So that would correspond with the notion that I saw Trev you're working your mic. Did you have something to throw in there?
Yeah.
What's up?
Just couple things that all made me think of. One, initially, what you're like describing there is, well, I get what you're getting at, but that's a tricky thing to navigate, because it's that what you're describing has been done in the past, and that's how people get into totalitarian rules, right? Is they collectivize on the macro, but they do so by assigning moral obligation to individuals on the micro.
That's fair. Yeah.
So it's inflate people on the micro so that they can collectivize towards a one other individual's goal altogether. And
which is large scale manipulation, basically, is what you're saying.
Right. Which is communism for those at home.
Also, yeah.
And I think the running, because there's like 2 different things y'all are getting at, and I think what ties them together is because you're Michael, father, you're saying there's lack of motivation. You're saying there is still a motivation, not much has changed, but I think what the underlining, what the common denominator there is, there's still motivation, but I think people are losing the intention. So there's motivation without intention is what I'm saying from a lot of my peers lately. So we have, there's still, people are still motivated, but they're doing it for motivation's sake. And that's what you find with like the grind people who are just doing it for the grind with no actual intention or end. And
they're running the treadmill.
And from that point, you get people who are having kids much later in life, because it's all about like the things you listed before, which was, the boss for the paycheck, and they're focusing on themselves as individuals, but really focusing on yourself as an individual without contributing to something on a larger scale, like what you were talking about is kind of like it's fruitless, right? Because it doesn't actually get at anything.
Yeah.
So it's like
he surprises you with things sometimes.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll let you talk about that while
I love that. I love that notion. First off, yeah, absolutely. I think that the people don't have. I think that people are finding themselves to be less deliberate. So going back to my proposal with my wife for a second, I asked my wife before she was my wife, before she was even my fiance, when we were dating, and I said, So, if we were having a conversation about getting married or getting engaged and stuff like this, and I asked her, I said, what does a proposal look like to you? Like, a lot of people think that a proposal needs to be this grand gesture and all those sort of things. But I said, what does it look like for you? Is there anything from your childhood or anything like this that you really want to have as part of this? And she said, and this is I was already in love with her. That's a lot. I was already in love. Thanks. I was already in love with her before this, but this is what really sealed the deal for me. She said, well, I want 4 things. I want it to be intentional. I want it to be purposeful. And I want it to be deliberate. And I want there to be a ring. Those are the 4 things, right? And
did they all start with the same letter? Wait a minute. Were they like the
intentional,
4?
purposeful, and deliberate? Yeah.
You hadn't developed your methodology yet.
That's correct. I need to figure out what the acronym that comes from that is. So but my point to you is that I love the notion that, I agree. There's sort of action.
And all those things you listed are intention.
They are.
It's not we're getting married because we're in love.
Yeah.
Or something, right? But it's also not what's very popular is getting, because it's intentions, but not worldly intentions, where people get married now because of tax breaks or some convenience or something.
But, not to go down this rabbit hole, but that was how marriage started for a long time, right? It was intended as a way. We were talking about, for example, the way that people own property and how it was passed down, sure. Right? A lot of times, for example, at least in Europe, for example, marriage was a thing where people, I'm going to get married to, like, I'm a boy and I'm going to get married to the girl next door because her father has the land that we can combine into like this larger tract of land or something like that. Right? These were largely the motivations. In fact, the notion of romantic love didn't really exist until in like society wide for a long time.
In some countries, it's not completely there yet.
It doesn't. In some countries, it doesn't even exist at all, or it's certainly not part of like the major social fabric.
Right.
But not to take away from that, but we're talking about intention and intentionality, and I think that's a word that is very, very much missing from our social fabric, like the most prominent parts of our social fabric today.
What do you think it is that caused that?
I think that things are in flux, and I think that maybe they're in flux faster than they have been in the past.
Like things on what scale do you mean?
Just the shift of cultural norms, regardless of. I'm not making a normative judgment as to what, whether or not like the direction we're heading is the right direction or anything like this. It's more a question of the speed, not the direction.
So you're more focused on making sure things are done right before.
I'm not saying that I'm more focused on that, but that's certainly an interpretation. I think that it's just a question of we are moving. Society as a whole is adjusting, changing in ways faster than they ever have been in the past, ever in human history.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
they're just changing. And people, I don't think, human beings as these biological social organisms are simply not equipped. We haven't evolved to be able to adapt that quickly. Our societies have not, like the ways in which we connect have not adapted. But the technology exists. This is a fundamental problem that I see with social media.
Yeah.
It's not the problem with social media. It's not like, sure, there are probably problems with social media. It's not the problem with a particular platform. It's not the problem with the people on those platforms, anything like this. What it has done, though, it has allowed us to voice our opinion in, like, you said the town square earlier, Twitter, right? Yeah. So it's allowed us to voice our opinion. But the town squares were, like, you had to go to the town square.
Yeah.
And the town square was... it was there.
And you had to worry about getting beat up if people didn't like what you said.
It had physical boundaries to it, right? You go to the town square. If you couldn't get there, like if it was crowded or something like this, you would go home or you would go do something else. But these days, the town square, because it's virtual,
Right.
doesn't have those limitations. And I think that flux, I'm kind of shifting gears here for a second, but the going back, is that the rapid flux of society has confused a lot of people. We're not rooted, regardless of what the norms are, regardless of what the values are, we're not rooted in values. We're rooted instead in sort of like what is ever changing in front of our own eyes. And that's a major problem for us. And it doesn't create that intentionality. Intentionality is about what I'm going to do now and in the future.
Right.
But it has to be rooted in beliefs and assumptions and myths and metaphors that I have from the past. But things are changing so rapidly that I don't see how people are able to process that to be able to create the cultural foundation from which they derive their own values and their own behaviors and attitudes. And so that intentionality, I'm not saying it doesn't exist within people, but I think it's certainly waned.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because things are changing so fast, we've become kind of unmoored.
I believe so.
So in the past, things would change over time, and perhaps values or like what kind of guides people, like the historical tether that kept people where they, and some that would change, but it would change slowly, right?
It would change over generations.
Right, very slowly, right?
Yeah.
Sort of like,
These days it's changing
it's
daily.
so you're really not, so you have no tether to anything historical or traditional.
You're tethered to the present.
Yeah,
You're tethered to
the present.
You're tethered to the present. And this is why I think that the compulsion of the connection that people have through social media is so prevalent, because people they're looking for a tether, and that tether exists in the now.
Right. And the now keeps changing.
And the now keeps changing. And the only way for me to keep up with it is through social media.
Interesting. Yeah.
Or other things, media, traditional media.
So what does this mean for our society going forward, do you think? It's
I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you that I mean, a lot of this is maybe rooted in the notion that I'm a very old school kind of person. Is that an example of this?
not as old as your brother.
Not as old as my brother. He is
Right.
still 10 years older schooler than I am,
Yeah.
whatever that terminology should be.
Yeah.
But
He's a boomer.
I guess I never really understood the demarcations of these different generations.
64.
Yeah, he's 60. He's 66.
No, born in. Oh,
He was born in 66.
he's born in. Oh no,
I
he's
was born in 66.
All right, so he's the same as me. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah, I was born in
just-
76.
We're just this edge of the boomers.
That's
so
correct.
we're just in the.
Yeah,
the
I'm now
beginning of the
giving
J's.
you all my birth information
Yeah.
so that you can break
See how
into
clever
my-
I was in bringing that out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but what is it? Okay,
My
so
first dog's name was Baron, by the way.
Baron. Okay. So I'm sorry, I threw you off. You said this is rooted in being old school, but what does it mean to our society?
Oh no, what I was saying is an example of this is that like I still write with pen and paper, and I believe that the reason I do that is because I don't have a great memory. So the way that I memorize things or process things.
Well, there's some good science too behind the connection between your brain and
writing.
Right, yeah.
But I think that we're losing that, for example, through digital technology. So look, I'm a technologist, or at least I was, and I drive technology.
Now you're just an old guy. Yeah.
I'm just an old guy now. But I try to drive technology through the companies that I build.
Right.
And I'm continuing to do that. Maybe in a failing way, but regardless.
Yeah.
Trying to do that, right? And so I'm certainly not a Luddite, but at the same time, I also believe that the technology itself is causing these sorts of broad social changes and individual changes in a way that we're not really tethered
don't really
to.
know. Yeah,
we're not connected to. And I don't think that we're going to know probably for 10 to 15 years of sociological longitudinal study, right? We don't know what the effects are going to be.
It does make it, though. It does make kind of a nice canvas. To Trevor's point, which he didn't quite get to this point.
Sorry.
No,
I cut him off.
no, we're good. He's not supposed to talk that much.
Oh.
So
Intentionality.
So you mentioned the thing about this is kind of how you drift toward totalitarian rule, which is, or the notion of a whole bunch of people collectively feeling that they have a moral obligation to do something that really is serving the purpose of one or a few. That's communism. That's really what communism. Like if you read
Marx.
If you read Marx,
yeah,
that's the objective. The objective is not to make a utopia for everybody, right? So, but it's interesting. This is where we can like pull out some conspiracy theories. But if you wanted to move a society in a direction like that,
yeah,
this is the perfect untethering of people. Not that it was orchestrated intentionally, because there's far too many things in terms of the technology and everything. Like you could,
right, but certainly you could take advantage of it.
You could take advantage of it,
absolutely.
Right? Like this is the canvas that's like ready for you to paint on.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
you
could move people easily.
This isn't even the canvas. This is the Pinot's palette of like paint by numbers of totalitarianism.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that that's the case. I mean, look, I'm pretty strongly like both classically and modern liberal. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's certainly this is a way.
Explain that. A lot of people don't understand the difference between that. So when you say classical liberal versus modern liberal, what do you mean?
I mean, the way that I see it, and I'm probably wrong, but the way that I see it is that like classical liberalism really is rooted in sort of like that notion of what we were talking about, individualism, right? This notion of like the ability. I mean, classical liberalism, I think, came about. Again, I'm not a historian. I'm not a scholar in these matters, so I'm probably very wrong about these things. But this is my take.
Just a simple mathematician.
Just a simple.
That's what. Do you know George Danner? That's what he always. That's how he describes himself. I'm a simple mathematician.
It's is rooted fundamentally in individualism. The notion of being able to like take an individual and be able to manifest the individual, like the thing that you were talking about regarding this book here. Can't remember who it is.
The Epic of
America.
The Epic of America.
I'm now promoting this now 90-year-old book. So
the Adamses are very grateful to you.
There you are. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if it's the same Adams, but they had quite a legacy in American history. So shoot, I forgot where I was going with it.
Classical liberal, individualism.
Is rooted in individualism. And modern liberalism, because of the way that we've interpreted it, is rooted in collectivism, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think so. This is my take. I was talking about sort of the dualism between collectivism and individualism. I don't.
And you mentioned the
Manichaeism, of a good versus evil and things like this. Yeah. But it's not. But I don't think that it's actually a dualism. I think that it's a balance, and I think that there are ways to allow individuals. Allow is not even the right word, because it implies that it is ours to grant upon them.
Yeah.
It's
you got to be careful in Texas saying allow individuals.
It's ensuring the enablement of individuals to become whatever the best version of themselves is, however they might interpret that. And that's the important part. I think that last phrase is the critical thing in sort of classical liberalism. I'm not saying that it's stated this way, but it's not about who the individual is as society interprets them. It's the way it's right. Who the individual is as they interpret themselves,
right?
And as they wish to be,
right?
But then finding ways to how do we allow? Now, again, I'm using that word.
That's okay.
Enable.
We'll give you a pass. We get it.
Okay, just cut that out when you edit this. So, enable each individual to be the best version of themselves as they wish to be, or as they see itself to be. But then how do you take all these millions or billions of people across the globe and then find ways for each of them to fit into a place. That to me is the modern liberalism. That's the collectivism. And I don't think that the two are necessarily in conflict with one another. At least, so one of you. I'm sorry, I apologize.
It's more the Star Trek collectivism that you're really describing.
Yeah. The currency in Star Trek, in the notion of a federation,
right.
in Star Trek, the currency is not money. Right, it's individual sort of like.
Which is why you can't buy Italian food when you go
respect.
back in time, because you don't have any money and you have to.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah,
absolutely.
You have to get the girl to pay.
All you got to do is save the whales or something. So you've got to. But no, the point is that we have to be able to find ways, and I think that I will say that I think that we can find ways to do this through digital technology, because digital technology doesn't have the cognitive limits that the human brain does. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't have any cognitive limits, but it doesn't have the same level of cognitive limits that the human brain does. And so I think that we can find ways to do this, but that is to enable every person to become the best version of themselves as they see it, but then fit them, allow them to fit. And this is where the allowance actually may be the right word, is the allowance of fitting them within a broader collective framework. Allow them find the jobs, if you will. Allow them to find the roles within the society that best suit them, because that's what they have decided that is best for them. And that is not something that before the enablement of digital technologies within the last, especially 5 to 10 years, maybe in the last 30 years, has really been a
you were much more a cog in the machine before.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a key thing to what you said there, which is,
please tell me, because I don't know what it is.
It was pretty good though. Enabling, allowing, whatever.
Enabling. We're going with enabling.
Ass kicking, whatever it is.
Yeah.
People to become the best version, to become the version of themselves that the way they see themselves, the way that's still implied in that is still some notion of I'm taking responsibility for myself, and this is how I see myself, this is what I want to be, and I'm taking some responsibility for doing that. What I'm asking of the rest of the world is to provide a place for me to do that.
Right.
Not to do it for me, right? Not to just grant me that outcome, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of this talk now, but what you said is like, it's still kind of on me to have a purpose.
You have to do the work,
right? To have a purpose,
and aims and aspirations and stuff like this. You have to figure that out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, I'm not saying that others
but
can't
it's
help
different
you.
from the old way, which was, or the old world, which was, you work for a company.
Yeah.
Your boss is like,
my father was a farmer and his father before him, or whatever. Yeah.
Like this is what we do because we do it, and just like shut up and do your job. Like, it's not that.
No.
But it's not necessarily. Let's just like fix the out. Just let's just give everybody.
It's finding a place for everyone that best suits them.
Yeah. Which we can do in a way that maybe it's not that we didn't want it that way before.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, we probably didn't. But even if we did, there wasn't a way to do that.
Well, I mean, one thing I'll point out about the totalitarianism is that the vision and the strategy in a scenario of totalitarianism comes from one or a few people, and it's top down.
Yeah.
But I actually believe that through the enablement, through digital technologies, for example, today, that there are ways for us to actually flip that on its head and enable the collective action to actually come from the collective itself, come from the people. Right? In my mind, it's actually the opposite of totalitarianism.
Can they do that in a way that what's the word I'm looking for? Can they do that in a way that heads off any attempt by the top to take control of them. That's the key, right?
Yeah. So
Like,
back in the past, there was this notion of museums. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that these days.
I've been to them.
You've been to a few?
Sure. Have you been to a museum?
You've been to a
I've been
museum?
to a museum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was the notion of museums, and I actually wanted to create a museum years ago. I mean, not that I had the resources to do so, but it was called the Museum of Tyranny, and it sounds like a really, really bad place. But my intention with it was
The Holocaust Museum sounds like a bad place too.
well,
but
that's
there
also
are,
true.
There are reasons.
Yeah,
for these
no,
things,
this was
right?
kind of similar to that, in the sense that the idea was to actually highlight how tyranny and totalitarianism and stuff like this have come about, so that we can educate ourselves as a society or whatever to be able to and inform ourselves of how we can maybe identify when it's occurring and how to stave it off. And I think that like we don't have enough, and my point is that we don't have enough research, I think. And when I'm saying research, it doesn't have to be like academic scholarly research, which is basically a circle jerk these days. But instead, I mean, anthropologists talking to anthropologists, and sociologists talking to sociologists, and physicists talking to physicists, and things like this.
Yeah.
There's a really,
and then it's government funded, so the research turns out the way that they want to.
Well, or whatever, right? It has to be funded, right? Like there's this wonderful book by Victor Weisskopf, who is called "The Privilege of Being a Physicist," and he talks in the foreword. And I've read the entire book, and the most interesting part of it is the foreword, and I mean, it's not an uninteresting book, but to me the most interesting part of the foreword is the foreword, and he talks about the privilege of being a physicist, and I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, is that it is that basically you're given all of these resources to conduct these relatively obscure experiments or whatever that that like drive human knowledge.
No one understands.
That nobody understands, and all you're asked to do to give back to the public funders of this research is some obscure things that they'll never understand themselves, right? Like in the form of like papers and things like this. And but I mean that's the way that academia is. But we won't go down that road on this episode, at least. And so the other point though is the bigger point, I think, is that I don't believe that there is enough understanding of how these things come about. Totalitarianism, tyranny, things like this. We don't really have an understanding of when to like.
We recognize it when we see it.
Well, to some degree,
it's there.
But we don't recognize it in an objective way. We recognize it in a way that is that through a certain lens. An example of this, and again, this isn't a political commentary, but an example of this is when Donald Trump, became the president. And his administration, there were a lot of people who were talking about the tyranny of the Trump presidency and the totalitarianism. And I'm not here to comment as to whether or not that's true or what is not true or anything like this. But maybe my silence speaks volumes. I have no idea. But the point is instead is that we didn't really have an understanding. We don't have an understanding as a society, as a civilization, of whether or not that could be true. Like there's not an objective assessment.
Right. We interpret it subjectively.
We interpret it through the lens of wherever seat we're in or whatever side of the aisle we're in.
And whatever, exactly. We had on here a few weeks ago Wes Verdell, who was he was actually a congressional candidate. He's from here in Texas, and he's a pretty he's a libertarian in the traditional sense of libertarian, very Frederick Bastiat, the law, right? And
evolution of classical liberalism.
Yeah, exactly. And he said one of the things he said that I've often thought about this, and he really put it into words, was he said, we well, actually, no, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he said, we like the idea of liberty and freedom and the government not interfering, but when somebody else is doing something that we don't like,
absolutely,
we want the government to go to do something about it,
right?
And he said, and really, that's not liberty at all,
right?
And if I'm really going to be for individual personal liberty, then I have to realize that there are some people who are going to do things that I don't like and I don't agree with, and I have to.
Yeah, it's like that old joke about when I was a kid, I was told that anybody could be president. Now I'm starting to believe it.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody wants to be president.
Yeah.
Even if, they're like, oh, well, if I were president,
Someday
I would do
when I'm
this or I would do that.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
The point is really, I think is that everybody has their opinions on things.
So what I was saying about that is,
sorry.
So no, so we have a tendency to call foul, like to accuse somebody of totalitarianism or of authoritarianism or like whatever label you want to give it. We have a tendency to do that whenever it doesn't line up with how we want things to go.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
mean, yeah. I think that some of these things can only be seen thus far and through a historical lens. It's very difficult to know these things with foresight.
Yeah. Someday the historians will study the historical documents.
Yeah.
Just like in what was that movie? The historical documents.
I don't know.
The historical Galaxy Quest.
Galaxy Quest.
The historical documents.
Yes.
Who knows what they'll
Oh yeah, those
what
absolutely
they'll determine
interpretations
about
and
it.
everything like this.
However, so this didn't. So this was great because we didn't talk about anything that I planned on talking about,
Yeah.
and it was way better.
Yeah.
So, but I did promise to get you out of here. You
don't have to.
before time.
Hang out for a little
now
bit
he wants
longer.
to stay.
I don't know what time it is.
I do have. All right, so I want to.
We got a little bit more
You got
time. I've got more time.
I want to shift gears since we're kind of on this social.
The longest podcast episode ever.
Yeah, no. Are you kidding? So obviously, yeah. You don't know. You have no idea.
I don't actually.
But on this social bent, and tying that back together with the entrepreneurial topic, there is.
You want to come back to that?
No, really, what I want to come to is something that I think is kind of funny, and I've been looking for an angle to work it in. One thing that has come up on the show multiple times, and I mentioned this at the beginning, is people have said, one of the great things about this country is that you can do things here that if you were in other countries, if you're in other places, you'd be inhibited from doing, either because there's too much bureaucracy or there's not enough freedom or like whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And another thing that has
I'll call
come
bullshit
up,
on that, but
yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
And another thing that people have said, and the people that said that are people that came here from other countries.
Sure.
But their experience is limited.
some other countries, I'm sure that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Maybe most other countries.
South Africa.
Yeah, sure.
And so, and another thing that has come up, I can't remember what the other thing is, but the question is, here's the other thing that comes up is the system broken here? Like, does the system need, like, whatever you consider it to be the system, certainly there can always be improvements, but like, is the system broken or does the system fundamentally work and, people are broken? So, I
don't know. I don't know that it has to be either of those things.
Sure, but so the sort of dichotomy, which maybe isn't necessarily a dichotomy, is some people have argued and said, look, the system isn't perfect, but it's better than any other system,
right?
And it basically works if you themes like hard work and determination and your own bootstraps and things like this, right? And then there are other people that have said, no, the system is rigged against certain groups of people, and therefore the system is shit.
Yeah.
So we got and just ironically, just recently we got our very first review on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, okay.
On Apple Podcasts. I'm very proud. Trevor and I were
a good review.
We're very excited. No, it's a terrible review.
Oh.
But we're excited to get it nonetheless.
Okay.
And Trev, can you pull that up? And here's what somebody said about this show. There you go. Please stop. Now, this is from somebody named Banana Shit.
Yeah.
So
and they didn't even
that's
spell
with three
banana
N's.
correctly.
Banana with 3 N's, right?
Yeah.
And it's and Banana Shit says, "What dream are you saving? You're a cis white man. What have you ever had to overcome?"
That's fair.
And
Maybe.
Wait a minute. I told you I was 22 with like babies to feed. So, but this is a perspective,
Sure.
right, of some segment of society.
Sure.
We were talking about society and whatever.
Sure.
And I got to believe that whoever banana shit is, this is their perspective, and we've seen this perspective from other people. Is that so?
Hey, banana shit. I'm a cis brown man, by the way.
Cis brown, yes.
Yeah.
So totally different.
Although I will say that, like, my actual brown friends, like people who are from India and things like this, they call me a coconut because I'm brown on the outside and white on the inside.
So, with the work that you do, so with your obviously you've got your brain is rooted in a lot of these ideas, and you've put a lot of thought into this sociological nonsense. But you're out there working with people who are trying to make it.
Yeah.
Right. How much does this notion of certain groups are privileged and therefore automatically, like, how much does that play into people's success, do you think? And I'm not arguing that it doesn't play in at all. But I suspect maybe it doesn't play in as much as banana shit thinks it does. So, like, where does that fall?
You ever see that SNL skit with Tom Hanks, and he's he's on is it like, I think it's on Jeopardy? Oh, you ever seen this one?
So I have to confess that I haven't seen a lot of Saturday Night Live.
Oh, okay.
After the original cast.
Well, that's fair. I mean, it was much better back then.
Yeah. So,
but and no offense to any SNL current cast members who are listening to this podcast, but
so many of them are. All of them are.
They're all like, if any one of them do, I imagine all of them will.
Yeah.
After this.
Yeah. Right.
But forget where I was going. Oh yeah, I remember. Now, so there was
Jeopardy, Tom Hanks.
It was a wonderful sketch. I think it was Jeopardy, and he plays this like stereotypical kind of like redneck. Tom Hanks does redneck white dude, right, on Jeopardy,
right,
and the other two, I can't remember who they.
That's just Forrest Gump.
That's just
basically, yeah. And so, but the brilliance of that sketch, in my mind, was that they found actual commonality amongst there was like I forget all the participants. Oh, I think one of them was can't remember who the cast members are, but the one of them was a black man, I think, if I recall correctly, and the other one was a black woman or something like this, and and he's obviously has, seemingly on the surface at least, a very different experience, and he's, it was Black Jeopardy. That's what it was, Black Jeopardy. And so he's on Black Jeopardy as this like redneck white dude.
Okay.
And so, but he's answering the questions.
Yeah.
And he's answering the questions from his own perspective. Are you gonna bring up the clip?
The Black Jeopardy. Yeah. There we go.
Black Jeopardy, Tom Hanks. And so it's brilliant because they find this commonality. I mean, in the end, they lose it, but they find this commonality, right?
There it is, Black Jeopardy.
And so, going back to what was it, banana shit?
Yeah.
I look. First off, I think that you can be a cis white male and not have privilege. That's the first thing. And one of the things that you that banana shit. One of the things that you maybe part of your privilege is you may be subject to particular biases. Every single one of us are subject to our own biases, right? Biases of ourselves, and because of our social connections, the biases of those around us. And so you could be pointing to somebody because they're a cis white male and saying that they have privilege. First off, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
There are plenty of cis white males in the United States and elsewhere in the world that do not have privilege.
Yeah.
Right. Of an socioeconomic sense.
Right.
Right. Is what we're generally talking about. But the other thing about it is that the vast majority of people, regardless of race, regardless of socioeconomic condition, regardless of anything, the vast majority of people do not have the privilege, going back to what we were talking about, individualism versus collectivism, which is apparently what this podcast episode is about.
Obviously.
Is most of us, regardless of your position in life, regardless of your heritage, do not have the opportunity to actually become who we ourselves want to become. And we just don't. Nobody, it doesn't matter who, like, if you are very poor, and let's just throw it out there. Let's say that you're a very poor person of color who is also happens to be pansexual or something. It doesn't matter. You could be that.
That was my nickname in high school, by the way.
Or you could be a cis white male who grew up in you're a child of, like the 1% elite or something like that.
Sure.
In both of those instances, nobody is going to ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
And when you are asked that question, that is the privilege. And so I'm a guest on this podcast. I don't know much about it. I mean, I didn't look it up or anything like this before I got here.
Why would you?
Yeah, why would I? I don't know anything about this. But from what my take on this is that and we're not necessarily responding to Banana Shit's
not necessarily
thing. But here's the thing. I think what we need to do, and we need to do more of, and we need to be better at, and I mean this for all of us, is we need to be better at asking those around us, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do? Who are you actually? And in American society, and we this is a joke nowadays, but you go to a party and people ask you, what do you do?
I hate that.
Right? I ask that question.
Yeah.
Because I'm American, brown on the outside, white on the inside. I'm American.
Coconut.
I ask that question, but then I ask people, why do you do it?
Yeah, that's
when
a
they
different
tell
question.
Me, that's a very different question. Or I ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Which is a question that my father asked me. And he told me himself that he didn't know the answer to for himself when he was 60 years old. He said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
We don't ask that question. And so
That's interesting because when I was a kid, people asked that question. So
it
somewhere along the line, we've stopped asking
We've stopped that. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that broadly as a society, we have kind of stopped asking that question. And number two, I think that we also stop asking that question when people reach a certain age.
For sure.
Right. But my point is that, look, none of this shit matters.
Yeah.
What matters is this. We collectively need to be better. I mean, nobody should care about the color of your skin. Nobody should care about the color of your eyes. Nobody should care about the shape or the size of your nose or their feet or something like this. None of that shit matters. But what does matter is your experience.
Yeah.
And it's what your past has been. So there's this notion of you might have heard of it. It's called kintsugi. Have you ever heard of this term? You know what it is, even if you haven't. Hey, Trevor, do you mind pulling up, you doing a quick Google search, an image search of kintsugi?
Kintsugi.
Kintsugi. KINTSUGI. Played a game recently where I had to spell stuff. And it was really terrible. Go to the images, please. Yeah, anything is fine.
All right, the image. All right.
It is the art. I'm sure I'm slightly misrepresenting it, but it is the art of mending pottery with ostensibly gold. In reality, it's gold-laced adhesive.
Oh, cool.
Okay. I love this notion, both because I think that the art is beautiful, but beyond that, beyond pottery, I think that the notion of it is absolutely stunning in the context of the human condition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look.
So that second one with the gray one, that's the one. That's my favorite image. Yeah, that one. I love that image, and it's stunning. But now think about applying this notion to people. We as a society, we have a tendency to be like, oh well, and especially in the work world, but not just in the work world, just society as a whole, we have a tendency to look at people and be like, don't tell me about all the shit you've been through. Don't tell me where you've cracked or broken or anything like this. Like, I have a friend, for example, and I'm not going to name names, but I have a friend, for example, who was a pretty severe drug addict and then brought herself out of that. And I am so incredibly proud of her.
Yeah.
Like, to me, she has, to her, in her own perception, she has cracks and breaks in her persona, in her past. But to me, it's, we as a society need to be able to perform kintsugi on each of us and highlight the cracks and the breaks in each of our personas, because that's what makes us unique. That bowl, that gray bowl right there, that bowl, if it were not cracked, if it were not broken, it would not be interesting.
No, it'd just be a gray bowl.
But it is interesting because of the unique nature of the cracks and the way that the gold enhances the gray. I'm kind of colorblind, so I'm assuming it's gray. The gray nature of the pottery.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
No.
I mean, I've got that gold, gray, yellow.
Yeah, you're right on.
Blindness, color blindness.
It's great. That's actually.
That's, by the way, offensive to people who are colorblind.
I'm sorry.
People who are who have colorblind. Sorry, not who are colorblind, because that doesn't define them.
Color challenge.
That doesn't define them.
Yeah.
So my point is that we don't do this enough. We don't look at people and be like, tell me about all the suffering that you've had. Tell me about the cracks and the breaks in your life. I want to know more about that, because that shapes who you are. I will tell you that, not to make this about me, but I'm the guest on here, so I'm just going to say whatever I want. So I have no regrets.
Yeah.
None whatsoever. And the reason I don't have any regrets isn't because I haven't done shit that hasn't, like, I haven't fucked up or something like this. I've fucked up a lot more than most people, perhaps, right? But the reason I don't have any regrets is because of the following.
I'm sorry, just leave them.
What was it?
It was my glasses.
Oh.
Because of the following. Why don't you have any regrets?
I don't have any regrets because I don't know if I can articulate this well, but I will do my best. The person who I am today has been shaped by the experiences that I've had, including those things that I might otherwise regret. And therefore, in an existential sense, it makes no sense to me for this person and my identity to regret things that have shaped the person that now has those regrets.
Right.
Right? That makes no sense to me. It instead makes far more sense to me for us all. And this is where entrepreneurship comes in.
Yeah.
It's not about entrepreneurship as, oh, I'm going to start a business. It's about entrepreneurship as a mindset. And the mindset should be that we seek to push the envelope. All of us. Mm-hmm. We should seek to push the envelope of who we of the things that we're doing and the society that we're in, but also who we are. A little bit. Just to push the boundary just a little bit. And what I tell, for example, the partners and employees that I have in my own businesses, I say, if you're not failing 20% of the time, then you're not doing it right. I don't want you to fail more than 20% of the time, because we're commercial ventures and we have to, you know, build things and hopefully
and there's one less bank in the world, so let's let's hold it together. Yeah.
But also, you know, if you're not failing 20% of the time, that means you're not pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
You're not doing the thing. Now
you're staying in the safe zone, right?
You're staying in the safe zone.
Right, yeah.
And so kintsugi is, in my mind, a way of recognizing, acknowledging that in the past you pushed the envelope, or you know, maybe shit just didn't go the way that you planned them to, or you know, maybe you have some really horrific shit that has happened in your life,
right?
You know, and tell me about that.
Yeah
like tell me about that. Let's find ways to use those things for the betterment of yourself, because that's who you are. That's part of who you are. Don't run from it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a therapist or a counselor or anything like this, like a coach, but I think that that's important.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And you're leading people who are in the, as we described before, in that zone where it's tense. You're at the end of your emotions. You're taking a big risk. You're trying to. So in a way, you are a counselor and therapist and coach and all of those things, right?
My wife she lost her job back in August, but she's taken some time off. But she's her career has been as a nonprofit executive. And her career, my point is that her career has always been one of, I'm going to go to this job. I'm going to go 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm not taking my work home. I'm not doing anything like this. This is the thing. And it's been a relatively safe and secure, like, career for herself, right? And she, like, we are polar opposites with regard to what we do. You know, like, I worked 100-hour work weeks, and fortunately, I have somebody at home that not just allows that, but enables it, actually.
Yeah.
But the
it takes care of all the stuff that you can't do because you're working on it.
And believe me,
do that
by the way, just to be clear, that's almost everything. Like if what I tell people is that if you put 12 what I call operator preservers, these are people who like actually get shit done, like day in, day out, and they're not looking to like be innovative or disruptive or anything. If you put 12 like operator preservers in a room and gave them food and water for a week, at the end of the week, they would have done something. If you take 12 Neals and put them in a room for the week, at the end of and give them food and water for the week, at the end of the week, you will have 12 angry Neals. That's it, right? So I can't do jack shit. Okay,
Right,
I mean, if it were for her, I might be able to make it through breakfast, but I wouldn't be able to eat for the rest of the day.
Right.
And so, but my point is that she asked me. She said, "You seem always confident about things, and you're always like moving things forward, and it doesn't matter what's happening in your work and all this other things. You're never getting." And I'm like, "Babe, I am a nervous wreck every single hour of every single day. There's a reason I don't sleep particularly well. Right? It's just a thing.
Right.
But I've had basically 2 jobs in my entire life. The first job I had was I worked at Taco Bell on the line. And the second job that I had was I worked for an oil and gas market intelligence company. And in both cases, I got fired. And I realized that I can't hold a job down.
Yeah.
That's my kintsugi.
Right.
Like this is who I am. But I think that every single person should take their cracks and breaks. In my case, it's the ability in a modern world to not be able to hold down a job. So I've got to do something else. Right. It doesn't matter what it is, but I've got to do something else because nobody's gonna. I'm essentially unemployable.
Again, we come back to in spite of all your modern notions of how life possibly could be. You're still coming back to individual responsibility. You realize you have to do something else.
Absolutely.
You didn't say, well, I suck, so somebody needs to fix it for me. Right? Just give me like a universal income because, because a robot took my job.
I don't really find many people who are like that.
No, I don't think so. I don't.
In fact, quite literally,
but I think there's found another person. A small group of people that seem to want to promote that notion, and I'm not. And I can speculate as to the reasons why, right? But
did I move this?
Yeah, it's okay.
So
you're allowed to move it.
If I may, I think that maybe that is where the notion of cis white privilege in America lies.
Right.
It's not in. It's the notion that because you are, and again, it's not really truly cis white, but it's the notion that like. You are in a position where you can look upon others. You're relatively comfortable. I'm going to build on a stereotype here. So you're like a cis white female quasi-socialite who is like living in a suburban bedroom community or something like this. Sure. And you're comfortable. You're not wealthy, but you're comfortable.
Comfortable, right.
And you are and that's not to say that those people are truly like that. That's the stereotype.
Correct.
But you're looking upon others, and you're thinking, oh, those people are not of privilege. I need to help those people. Right? I don't think that those people, I'm not saying that they don't want your help. I'm saying I don't think, I've met those people.
Yeah.
And I'm of course, obviously, I am saying, I'm using an us versus them mentality, and I'm doing it purposely to highlight this notion.
Right.
Right? Like, I don't believe that all of them are the same. I don't believe anybody of any group is the same. But you're looking at, but I've met those people, and I'm putting it in quotes. Thankfully, we're on video. So I am those people. I've met those people.
Yeah.
Those people, they want to pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yeah.
They want to work. They want to accomplish things. They want to do things.
Yeah.
Not to say that this. I'm not trying to make a direct correlation, but it is again a stereotype. Are you familiar with the prison entrepreneurship program?
No.
Okay, so this is a wonderful organization that what they do is they go into prisons, and they work with select groups of people.
They don't go to prison, but they
don't go to prison.
They go into prisons.
Go into the prisons. and they go in and they mentor.
Let's see, Grandma. Yeah.
They mentor people who have skills and abilities and perspectives about just wanting to like make something of themselves. And a lot of these people, for example, a lot of the prisoners, they, I don't know what proportion, but let's just suppose that some of them, at least, maybe a majority, they're in prison because they were drug dealers. Okay. So what this program does is it takes those types of people and others and such like this and says, when you come out of prison, you're going to come out of prison sometime in the near future. So when you come out of prison, you can go be a drug dealer, but maybe there's a different way, a more legitimate legal path for you.
Yeah.
And you can take the same skills, the same drive, the same intentionality
that made you successful.
That made you successful as
nabbed,
this drug dealer, and turn it into a small business.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Right? A legit.
Want to comment on something there?
Yeah.
Right before you said that, I thought of when y'all said you don't think you haven't met a lot of people who have that at it. Who every people want to work. Right?
Yeah.
You haven't met a lot of the people who are promoting those sort of ideas. And I was just thinking right before you said that most of the people I've met who have said, we need to using labels to attribute success to.
Yeah.
And they say that we need to help out those who aren't as advantaged because of your labels and such. Or the people who aren't as successful, we need to help them. But you said those people want to work, and the people who I have met that said that are the ones who don't need that help.
Yeah.
Right. So the people I've met who have said, we should install universal basic income. We should pay free college and such, all these government-issued benefits. I hear all those ideas coming from people who don't need those things.
Right. It's the people, and I think you said this at some point, or I don't know. We've been talking so long; it might have been a different day. But there's this notion of people sitting over here who actually are fine, but they feel like it's their social responsibility to go help people that aren't necessarily asking for help.
Because of going back to what y'all said, yesterday, was about how you don't have the values.
Right. See, that was funny, by the way.
That was good.
Like people don't have those values and they don't have that sort of motivation.
Look,
and so since they don't have that within themselves, they're searching for because they still have they're doing all these things, there's motivation and the grind and everything.
Yeah,
they're still doing that, but they're lacking that intentionality or that purpose, like what your wife was talking about.
Yeah,
but but they don't have any like that purpose, that end to it. So they're trying to find that within other.
Right. So you're trying to kind of attach to some other purpose somewhere, right? Yeah.
So that we'll call it moral obligation, right? Natural law within humans and such. That moral obligation. So you have to find that within a second party, right, outside of yourself. But that moral, you can't have moral without anti-moral, essentially. So you can't just go after a moral cause, i.e. those less fortunate, without something attacking that morality to make it morality.
Well,
so
and
that's why you throw labels, and that's why you get banana shit calling people's going after the elites, the cis white men and everything.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I was an elite, but now it's pretty cool that I know that I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's about being. I think the notion of privilege, which is attached to those labels,
Yeah.
is the notion. Look. Here's a fact. Most people are both smart and dumb at the same time.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that they're inherently, they have an ability and an intelligence.
Yeah.
And they may be trained, educated, and such like this. But at the same time, they struggle the vast majority of people struggle to not attach labels.
Yeah. The way I say that, by the way, is that humans are smart, people are stupid.
Yeah, I think that Tommy Lee Jones said something about that in Men in Black.
He did not.
Oh, sorry.
I came up
Am
with
I
that.
taking?
I
That's
came
on
up
your
with that
own.
on my
Oh,
own.
okay. Okay. Did you do that before?
He may have said
Eden?
you might be right about
I don't
that.
know, something like
Tommy
that.
Lee Minute. Yeah, you might be right about that. Shit, I thought I came up with that. Anyway, so you were saying. All right,
remember.
And whatever you're saying right now, wrap us up. Like, get us. Oh, here now, Trevor.
All right.
We're being
Within the next
fact-checked.
hour, we will be finishing this podcast episode.
Wow, son of a bitch.
A person is smart. People are.
A person is smart.
Oh, listen, we get to look at this ad for TurboTax because it's tax day. Oh wait, tomorrow's tax day, right?
Tomorrow's tax day, and I still need to file my
Do you know why tomorrow's tax day rather than today?
Emancipation Day.
Emancipation Day.
Yeah, I
Good
did.
for you.
Which, yeah. I don't think we have sound.
Oh, this is the long scene though.
Also, your Mac is about to is about to go to sleep.
Oh,
Anyway, anyway,
low battery.
Anyway, Tommy Lee Jones, he said, you're right. He said,
I have a low battery.
he
too,
said
by
a
the way.
person is smart, people are dumb. Is that what it was?
Yes.
You have a low battery? A person is smart, people are dumb. That's good. We should get together again, though.
We can do that.
We could do some more.
Yeah, that's cool.
Maybe bring her wife, and we'll talk about this whole how
She'll never do it.
The requirements that she put up. Was there a moment when you said, "Oh shit, she's gonna say yes"?
I asked her to marry me on our second date.
You-
Do you want to hear that story real quick?
Yeah, sure. Is it fast? Because Trevor's Mac's about to go to sleep.
So, in 2018, I found out that I had cancer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about that another time.
Another time.
But anyway, I found out that I had cancer, and so I was, I took myself off the dating apps. This is my second marriage, and I took myself off the dating apps, and but I thought I did at least successfully, and I didn't, and so I hadn't, and so I was going through chemo, and the only reason that's relevant is because this woman like messaged me on one of these dating apps. Later, she turned out to be my wife, but she messaged me on one of these dating apps.
She turned out to be your wife, or she became your wife?
Well, but she became my wife.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
it's not like the song, the Pina Colada song, where
No.
they meet up in the bar and they find
nothing
out
like
that it's actually your.
No,
Okay.
why are you trying to get me in trouble here? So anyway, so she messaged me, and she later became my wife. But so we went on this date, and we went on a date, and then we went on a second date. And at the end of the second, or not end of the second date, like in the middle of the second date, she said, "By the way, I know how you have cancer." And she found something on social media about me. She said, "I know you have cancer." And I was thinking, like, how am I going to tell this woman that I can now say that I've been falling in love with after our second date? So how am I going to tell this woman that I have cancer? And that
already knew.
and struggling. She
They
already
always
knew.
know. They always know
She found out.
everything. Yeah.
She cyber stalked me or whatever. And she says, So we talk about it a little bit, and then she says, is something wrong? And I said, well, no, but I'm a little surprised that you're not running for the hills. And she says, do I strike you as the kind of person that would be running for the hills? And I said, no, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, exactly. And so I was like, no, not at all. But you have to understand that this is like physically and emotionally and mentally and socially taxing.
Yeah.
And it'll be taxing on you if you were to date me. And she says, and I'll never forget this. And she says, let me tell you something. She said, right now, as of now, I've had 2 really good dates. And not that this is going to happen, but if for some reason you were to die tomorrow, I would treasure these really 2 amazing dates. But let's say that you die for a month from now. I get a chance to know you. And if you die 6 months from now, I have a chance to fall in love with you. And anything after that is icing on the cake. And I looked at her,
Will you marry
this
me?
woman, and I was like, admittedly somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but not entirely. I was like, will you just marry me now? And she just left. So that's how I knew.
That's amazing. That's
She's
a
the
great
most
story.
amazingly
That's
supportive
a
person
great story.
I've
Yeah.
ever met in my life.
That is, wow. But she won't come on the show to talk
I
about how
doubt it.
amazing you are.
She definitely won't go on the show to talk about that. That's for damn sure.
Oh, well. We'll have to get the story from you.
She might come on the show to tell you how she's the one who cooks and I'm the one who ostensibly does the dishes, but I don't ever do the
Yeah. You already mentioned how you don't actually do anything.
I don't actually do anything.
So, all right. I think
back to how when people ask you, what do you do? And you say you don't know.
And you
What
said,
I
don't
tell
know.
people is that
Your wife says, I know nothing. He does nothing.
when people ask me that question at parties, which is not often because I don't usually get invited to parties, is
That's clear.
I know, right? 'Cause I'm never being invited. You're talking about doing another episode, and I'm never being invited back. Thanks for being so polite. But what I tell people is, I create failed businesses, and sometimes I fail at that. And so,
Ah, yeah, a little crisscross.
A little bit crisscross.
Yeah.
or crossing the streams. I'm not sure.
What was it? So I think we used this quote on an episode before, but what was it? Supposedly, Thomas Edison said something about I haven't failed. I discovered 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb or
Yeah.
something.
10,000, I think.
10,000, whatever
Yeah.
it was. Yeah,
100,000. Why not?
Yeah, 100,000. Fail fast. All right.
By the way, it might be Mark Twain.
It might be Mark
Or George
it might have been
George Orwell.
It might be Mark Twain or George Orwell.
or
Or-
Winston Churchill or
Yeah,
Tommy Lee
or Kid
Jones.
Rock. Could be Kid Rock.
It might be Kid Rock.
Might be banana shit.
Yeah, and it might be banana shit.
Or banana shit might be Tommy Lee Jones for all we know.
That's a good place
Who
to
is
end.
also, by the way, as far as I know, a cis white male.
I think he is. I'm pretty sure he is. Are we done, Trev?
He's like, we were done a long
Can you turn
time
us
ago.
off? We're finished. That's it.